This is Gemar and Yoma Daf Lamed Ches, a good Tavach, a good Zimmer. The month of Sivan has been generously sponsored as a Schoshidach for Yishal Chaim and Devaira. Mir Tashem, all the learning of the entire Chabura should be a tremendous schos that Yishal Chaim and Devaira should find. He should Hagun Bekaroiv. Of course, all the Chelim, Rivka Bas Hashem, and Tel Sivan, Nechel Eser, Man Ben Vega Chaim, and Sarj, and Sivan Reizidol, Zarbas Knendel, Ita Basiyam, Chayesay, Yisol Ben Mindol, Eliezer Peretz, Shavlei, Shavim Bas Noami, Shavig, Shavichan, Shmol, Ben Tilo, Dinol, Chan Rizim, Chayv, Smil, Bracha, Bas Tova, Musa, Dinenu, Ben Shina, Mindol, Sivan Vegabon, Vichilis, Rod, Nathil, Huma, Menachamendo, Ben Taiba, Visoy Shar, Chali Yisrael, Sos, Choshidach, Fartalea, Bas Ita. We pick it up on the top of Lamid Ches. Amid Aleph. I hope everyone had a beautiful Shavuos, a wonderful Kabbalah Torah. Hopefully the Torah will be even smoother and with more clarity. B'siyata d'shmaya. We pick it up on the top line. Nikanar nasa nisim l'deloisav. The Nikanar, he made a miracle happen to his doors. Which doors? Who is Nikanar's doors? About a bit of a gadata today. Let's see. He says the Gemara Tanu Rabbanan. Ma nisim nas l'deloisav. What nisim? What miracles happens to Nikanar's doors? They said, Nikanor was bringing over the doors from Alexandria in Egypt. Upon his return, there was a tremendous wave at sea that was going to drown the entire boat. They took one of Nikanor's doors, they threw it into the ocean, and the wave did not subside from its anger. They wanted to throw off the other door of Nikanar. Nikanar stood up, and he grabbed his boat and he wrapped himself in his door. Ima, and he told them, if you're going to throw over my door, you have to throw me over with the door. Miyad, right when he said that, the ocean subsided, they were all saved, and that's how he got at least one door. When Nikanor was upset, what happens to the other door? When they reached to the dry land, they reached to the port Shel Akko of Akko, the other door was peeking out from underneath the boat. Who was saved right there due to Nikanar's wonderful Ava Mesiras Nefesh for the doors to bring them to the Beis HaMikdash. The Yeshayim, that was one story, and some say that you know what happened. The Beria Shavayam Balasai, there was a sea creature that swallowed the door Labasha and spit up the door onto the dry land. And upon it says Shleima Amelech Karois Batinu Arazim Rahitenu Beraisim, that the beams of our houses are like cedar and the doors are from Beraisim, from cypresses. I'll take you Beraisim Ella Bris Yam, rather the doors came from the Bris Yam, which is the creature of the sea. Lafikach Kol Hasharim Shem Mikdash Nishan Liyashal Zav. Because there was such Mesiras Nefesh for these doors, all the gates and the entire Beis HaMikdash they changed over eventually that they should make them out of gold. Chotz Mishal Nikanar Menation Nas by Nisim. They kept his door out of wood because they were Nisim that were done with it. V'yesharim, a different version, Nation Chayshaysa Matzavais Haisa, that the copper that his door was made out of, copper, I don't know, he said wood. The copper that his door was made out of, they kept it out of the copper because it's shown. It was a certain special type of copper that it would shine like gold. Those were the doors of Nikanar. Two versions of the stories, two reasons why they kept them and did not change them into gold. And that concludes the wonderful miracles of different parts of the Beis HaMikdash. And now continuing the theme on the opposite side of the coin, says the Mishnah Ve'elu Liganai, and the following items, following practices, we'll call them in the Beis HaMikdash, where it said over Leganai shall be Garmu, the family of Garmu. This should sound familiar, we've seen this before. Did not want to give over, did not want to teach how to make the Lechem Apanim, the showbreads on the Shulchan. Did not want to teach how to make the Keteres. Hogris ben Levi Yediyah Barak Bashir, he knew a special way of playing an instrument. And he didn't want to teach it. Ben Kamsel Al Maisa Aksav, he did not want to tell the special way he knew to write. Al Rishayim them are on the first Mishnah, all the wonderful deeds in the Beis HaMikdash. It says Zecher Tzadik Levracha Va'alelu Nemar V'Shei Rishayim Yirkav, and the evil should rat. And as we're going to see, the Gemara is going to go through each one of these families, what they did, why they didn't want to give over, and etc. Says the Gemara Tanaravan. Beis Garmu Ayabikim Maisalach Mabanim. They're Bekim with the creation of the Lech Mabanim V'Laretz Lamed. They don't want to teach anyone. So they had to make the Lech Mabanim. So they sent for craftsmen, for very special people that knew how to create bread from Alexandria in Egypt. They said that they could make the bread like the Beis Garmu for the Beis HaMikdash. They were able to bake it. They didn't know how to remove the bread like them. These would bake on the outside and attach it to the outside. And you know what happened? Because they baked it that way, these, their bread spoiled. The ones of Alexandria, the bread spoiled. Whereas Beis Garmu ain't just to point out, many people are wondering, we know that the miracle was that the breads did not spoil, was a special miracle that happened in the Beis HaMikdash. So why necessarily did it have to do with the way they created the bread? Here it sounds like it was almost a practical thing. They were special bakers, they knew how to break bread without getting it spoiled. So the Mefarshim explain, it's true as a miracle, but still we have to do everything in our power in order to prevent the miracle. Of course, says the Gemara, when the Chachamim heard that they weren't able to bake the bread, Amru Kamash everything Hashem created was for His honor. So they called back this Beis Garmu and said, you have to continue making the bread for the Beis HaMikdash. They didn't come. They didn't want to come back. They paid them double their wages. Then the Beis Garmu came to bake the lechem upon Beis HaMikdash. Previously, they would take 12 mana a day. They would take 24 mana. They had to double their wages to get the Beis Garmu back to bake the bread for the lechem upon him. What are you doing? Why don't you tell us how to bake the bread? And they said, we know. We heard the following from our fathers: this Beis HaMikdash, the second Beis HaMikdash, is not going to be permanent; it's going to be destroyed. Maybe the secret of creating the lechem upon will fall into the wrong hands. So they had the right intentions. Of course, they weren't acting appropriately, but they had the right intentions. They didn't want it to go to Avodah Zarah bekach. But for the following, so that which they did was terrible, as Mishnah delineated that it was a genai. They should have told the secret. But now the Gemara says there was one thing that this family did which was praiseworthy. That what? Their children never ate pas nekia, refined bread. Why? So no one should suspect and say, oh, you see that guy, you know what he's eating? He's eating bread for the lechem abanim. Which of course is where this Gemara came up the first time, all the different cases of being visim nekiim, how careful we have to be in the eyes of the onlurk, even when we're not doing anything wrong. So again, the Beis Garmu were mentioned for Genai, for a bad purpose, because they don't want to give over the secret. But at the same time, there was an element of shvach in that their children never, ever ate a certain type of bread, so people would not suspect that perhaps they're eating the bread for the lechem from the shulchan. Now we go to family number 2. Says the Gemara shall Beis Avtinas Loratz Lamed Al Ma'aseh Ketairis. And all these Gemaras, we had almost carbon copies of them previously. Says the Gemara Tanu Rabbanan Beis Avtinas Ayabikim Ma'aseh Ketairis. They knew how to make the Ketairis. They didn't want to tell anyone. So the Chacham said, okay, we need someone to bake the bread. So they called again the same craftsmen from Egypt. And they knew how to compound the different spices, like the family of Beis Avtinas. They were able to make the Ketairis, but they weren't able to make the special smoke like the Beis Avtinas. When the Beis Avtinas would make the Ketairis, the smoke would rise straight like a stick, like a column. But when the other people made it, it would just dissipate and spread out. When they heard they weren't able to replicate it, everything Hashem created is for His honor. They called the Beis Avtinas to come back to the Beis HaMikdash. They didn't want to come. They doubled their wages. Then they came. They would take 12 mana, 24 mana. 48 mana. What's the reason you didn't tell it? Bisavtinos. Why don't you teach anyone how to make the ketayres? Amru, they said, this house, this base is going to be destroyed. Amru, they said, we don't want it to fall into the hands of the wrong person. And they might make the ketayres for an idol. And therefore, that's what we mentioned them, that they didn't want to tell anyone. But similar to the case number 1 by Beis Garmu, by the Beis Avtina, says the Gemara, there was something that we mentioned them for good, that was there was never a kala that wore perfume that came from their houses. When someone from the Beis Avtinas would marry a woman, they made a unique tanai, unique condition. They would make conditions that they're not allowed to wear perfume. Why? They don't want people to say that they're getting perfume, they use the ketairis to give them the good smell. So no one in the entire family ever wore perfume. To fulfill that which says in the pasuk, you have to be pure, you have to be innocent, you have to be clean from Hashem and from Klal Yisrael. So you have to make sure your actions appear to be perfect in the eyes of people. Tanya, we learned in the Brayso Amar Rav Yishmael a little bit more about the Ketairis. One time I was walking on the road in Matzasi Echavim Nei B'neihem. I saw one of the children of the B'nei Avtinos, this family that made the Ketairis. Amartilai said to them, your father wanted to increase their honor. They didn't want to tell anyone about the Ketairis. And because of that, the honor of God, the honor of HaKadosh Baruch Hu was diminished. Because about the Ketairis, you know what happened? And of course, Hashem's honor stand in its place. But your father's honor has been diminished. One time he told me, I was walking with one of the children from the Beis Avtinas in a field to pick grass. And I saw he was laughing and he was crying. I said to him, why are you crying? I remember the honor of my father. I remember the wonderful honor they used to get in the Beis HaMikdash. So I'm crying the fact that is lacking. Why are you laughing? Eventually the Beis HaMikdash will be returned. Why did you remember that specifically now? Because there's certain flour over here. This was the ingredient that caused the Ketairis to go up straight in the smoke. So Rav Yishmael said, show me which flour. There's an oath in our hands. We're not allowed to show any person what this ingredient was. And he didn't. And a similar story, I one time found an elder who's holding a scribe with a list of all the different spices for the Ketairis. Where are you from? He said to me, I'm from that family, the Beis Avtinas that made the Ketairis. What are you holding? I'm holding the list of all the different spices. So Rav Yochanan said, show it to me. As long as my father, the elders were alive, then we wouldn't give it to anyone. However, Va'achshav said this elder, he did a bit of tshuva for the entire family. He gave it to Rabbi Yochanan. He said, here's the list of all the spices. Be careful with it. Told Rabbi Kiva that they gave over the list of spices. Amar li, me'ata. You're no longer allowed to talk degrading about that family, because they did shuvah. That they learn out from the pasuk. This is where Ben Azai learned that in your place they should call you, in the place that they should see you, turning over to La Mirchasa Bebeis Umishalcha Yitain Lacha, and from you it should be given. Ein Adam Nageh B'Mucha Nechaveru, a person does not touch that which is set aside for his friend. Vein Malchus Lagas B'Chaverta, one kingdom does not touch the next. Afilu K'Malinima, even a hair's breadth. So we see that they gave over, they did shuvah, no longer without to talk degrading about that family. That was family number 2. Beis Avtinas and the Ketairis. Family number 3, says the Gemara 3 lines down, Hugras ben Levi, he knew how to play a special musical instrument. Tanya when he would raise his voice, he would project his voice with a special ni'imas, a special sweetness. Machnes he would put his thumb in his mouth, and then he would place his fingers between the hairs of his mustache, whatever that means. And from the beautiful melody that came from the way he held his hand and the voice, they would flip over backwards from hearing the beautiful music that left the mouth of Ben Levi. That was Ben Levi. What was the next family? It was Ben Kamsar. He didn't want to give over the way he wrote. Amrullah, what was the special method he had of writing? You put four different quills like this is 1, 2. He put 3 and 4 different quills, and he had to write at the same time with all of them. If there was a word of 4 letters, he would write it at once. Amrullah Mari Isa Shalamid. Why don't you teach us how to write that way? Kulan matzu tshuva l'divrayim, ben kamsar loy matzu tshuva l'divrarav. He didn't have an excuse. He just didn't want to teach. He didn't even have an excuse. Al rishonim nemar zecher tzadik l'vrachov al ben kamsar v'chaverim nemar v'shem rishayim yirkaf. Just one word. What was so special? It sounds like a fascinating way of writing, but who cares? He wrote 4 letters at once. One of the pshatim the Mefarshim gave is because then he was able to write the Shem Hashem all at one time, the Yud Kei Vav Kei, and the Mailon, the advantage of that is that there's not one moment that you have a Shem Hashem lacking a letter, amongst other different things. Says the Gemara, "Ma'ay v'shem Hashem Yerkaf." What does it mean that the name of the wicked shall rat? Amar Rav Lazi Rakvivos Talib B'Shmaisam. We should not use their names. Their names should grow rust. T'lo Maskina B'Shmaya. We don't call people the same names of Rishayim. Masev Ravina Ma'isa B'Doyeg Ben Yosef. 1 second, there was a story with someone named of Doyeg Sheniach Aviv Ben Katali Imay B'Chol Yomin Osenes Mishkalai. Shalzav the Beis Hamikdash, that every day his mother would give his weight, he would weigh the baby, and she would give the value of the differences. I'm sorry, I skipped the line. Ben Katan li'ima b'chayim, I say ima, my dedasai b'tfachim. Each day she would measure how much this kid grew. But instead of mishkalai, Shalzav the Beis Hamikdash, and she would give the weight in gold to the Beis Hamikdash. Says the Gemara, Shekavar ayiv tabachtay v'chaltay, and then when the enemy grew, meaning when they conquered Yushalayim by the Churban, she ate her own son. And Valel Kainin Yirmiyah, and this is what Yirmiyah lamented in Tachalnu Nashim Biryan, that women are unfortunately eating their offspring. The babies in their care, they're destroying Meshiva Ruach HaKodesh. But the Ruach HaKodesh Vaymaris comes out and says, Im Yaharig b'Mikdash Hashem, Koyin v'Navi, if a Koyin and a Navi should be killed in the Beis HaMikdash. What do we see? We see that in this story, this unique story, again, how originally she was such a spiritual and wonderful woman, she would give to the value of her son's growth to the Beis HaMikdash, and then unfortunately by the Churban she was forced to eat that child. But what was the child's name? Doyeg, and Doyeg was a Rasha. But what do we see? We see that we give names of Rishayim. We just said a minute ago, V'shem Rishayim Yerkav. We don't give names of the wicked, but we see we do. Says the Gemara, Chazi Maisalik Bey. No, that's not a proof. Look at the end of the story. It was a dreadful ending. Amar Rav Elazar, and therefore it's not a raya that we should give names of Rishayim. Amar Rav Elazar, Sadik Me'atzmai V'Rasha Mechaverai. Says Rav Elazar, no, I'll tell you a different way of learning it. A Sadik is Me'atzmai. A righteous person is due to his own good deeds. V'Rasha Mechaverai. But a Rasha, we call him a Rasha even based on that which a friend of his did wrong. Sadik Me'atzmai Dechsev Sadik Sadik Levracha. In the singular, V'Rasha Mechaverai Dechsev V'Shem Rishayim Yerkav. That when you hang out with your Rishayim, you get included with them. Amar Le Ravina Lahu Me Rabbanan. Ravina said to one of the Rabbanan, Davi Misader Agadata Kamei, who was giving over and arranging the different Agadata, different teachings in front of him. Mina Milsa, where do we know Dam Rabbanan Zecher Sadik Levracha? Where do we know? Where does the concept come from saying Zecher Sadik Levracha? Amar Le Daksiv Zecher Sadik Levracha. It's a pasuk in Mishlei. Says him, he says, you're right, but where do we know this concept in the Torah, Bible? As the pasuk says, V'Shem Amar Mechas Ani Me Avram Asher Ani Oiseh. that he's speaking about Avraham, Vuksiv, and the Torah continues by saying, so we see when we mention the tzaddik, we mention it with together a bracha, and that's the raya that on daraisa level, Zichar tzaddik levracha. And we continue and we say, we flip it. Where does the opposite come from? That when you mention the name of Rishayim, it should rat the same thing we find in the Mishlei. Says where we know Landin Daraisa Sev, Vayel Atzadaim talks about Tzadaim, and then it says again we see you mention a Rasha, you mention it Lira. Rav Lazar Tzaddik Dar Ben Shnei Rishayim V'Laim Laman Meisayim. A tzaddik could live amongst Rishayim and he's not going to learn from their bad deeds. But a Rasha Dar Ben Shnei Tzaddikim, he as well, unfortunately, L'Laman Meisayim. What's the raya? Tzaddik Dar Ben Shnei Rishayim L'Laman Meisayim. Oivadia. That's referred to Oivadia. He lived. Ovadia, unfortunately, not unfortunately, Ovadia was a tzaddik, and even though he lived with Achav and Izevel, still he did not learn from their wicked ways. Now the opposite, Rasha Dar Ben Shnei Tzaddikim V'Lo Lamed Meisayim, and unfortunately, Rasha is living with good people. He should learn from them, and he doesn't. That's Esav. That Esav, of course, lived with Yitzchak and Rivka, and yet he did not learn from them. Rav Lazar, Amar Rav Lazar, Tzaddikim Atala made Klala L'Rishayim. From the blessing of the righteous, you learn a curse to the wicked, and we Klal. Says the Gemara. From the blessing of the righteous, you learn the curse to the wicked. The pasuk says, you should know that which I commanded, etc. And then what does it say? So from the bracha, we're learning out the klala to tzdaim. Kiraba, as they were a lot. And from the curse of the wicked, we learn how to blessing to the righteous. They were wicked and they sinned to God. And Hashem said, Abraham, after light separated from him, and what does Hashem say? Look up, and he gave him a wonderful blessing that whatever you're going to see, that's going to be your descendants, like the sun, the stars, like the sand, etc. That's when Hashem said, Kumu, get up and walk the land. V'amar Rav Elazar, another teaching, we have filu b'shil tzadik echad. One tzaddik, the whole world is worth to have been created. Shenemar v'yar lekim es ar ki toiv. Ve'in toiv el tzaddik, that refers to a tzaddik in the singular. Shenemar imru tzaddik ki toiv. Rav Elazar, Rav Elazar, kol mishkachach toivar mitalmudai. If you forget one teaching, kairim galus labanav, unfortunately, you could cause galus. You could cause exile to your children. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, v'titzach Torah salikecha eshkach b'anecha. Hashem says, if you forget your Torah, I will forget your children. Gamani. Rav Avua Amar says, Rav Avua on the first white line, my reading Isai Migad Lusai. If you forget your Torah, we're gonna take you down from your position of greatness. Shenemar, as the pasuk says, Ki atoidata me'asas v'masecha michayin li. That the pasuk says that you were Adas ma'asta, you forgot your knowledge, so I'm going to push you away from me, says Hashem. Amar Rav Chiya bar Abba Amar Rav Yechlan, Ein tzaddik nifter min ha'olam ad shenever tzaddik ha'maisai. When one tzaddik leaves, another tzaddik is ready to take his place. And as the pasuk says, V'zarach hashemesh u'bar hashemesh. Sun rises, the sun sets. Ad shaloi kafsa shamshai, shaloilei zarcha shimshai shel Shmuel Eli, zarcha shimshai shel Shmuel. Before Eli set, Shmuel came up. As Shmuel Aramasi, we see there's always the replacement waiting even before the previous tzaddik is nifter. Amar Rav Chiya bar Abba Amar Rav Yechlan Ra HaKadosh Baruch Hu Shes tzaddikim mu'atim. Hashem saw there were not many tzaddikim. Amar v'shat l'hem b'chol davar dar. Hashem planted them, sprinkled them throughout all the different generations. There's always some tzaddik. Shenemar ki l'Hashem etzukei eretz. As the pasuk says, "V'yashas alehem tevel," that Hashem says to Hashem the pillars of the earth, and He set the world upon them, referring to the tzaddikim that He puts in every generation. Amar Rav Chiya bar Abba Amar Rav Yechlan afilu b'shel tzaddik echad olam iskamim. Before we said it's worth the world to be created, now we say one tzaddik keeps the world. It says v'tzaddik yisoid olam, a famous pasuk, and the tzaddik is the foundation of the entire world. Rav Chiya didei Amar me'achi learned it out from a different pasuk that says, Ragle Chasidav Yishmar, the feet of the devout are going to preserve the world. Chasidav Tuva, Mashma. Says Mar, 1 second, Chasidav, plural. Sounds like you need more than one tzaddik. Amar Rav Nachman Yitzchak, Chasidah Iksiv in the singular. Amar Rav Chiya bar Rav, Amar Rav Yechon, 4 lines at the bottom. Kivish Yasa Rosh Neitz Shaladam, Lo Yachata, Shav Einoi Chaytev. So when he manages to live half his life without Aveiros, he'll live the rest of his life. Shemar Ragli Chasidav Yishmar, that Hashem is going to guard his righteous. Dvei Rav Shila Amri, the yeshiva of Rav Shila said, Kim Shabali Yadei Dvar Aveira Pamri Shaino Shnia. If an Aveir comes to your hand once and twice, V'inoi Chait, and you hold strong, Shav V'inoi Chait, you'll always be able to withstand the temptation. Shnemar Ragil Chasidav Yishmar. Amar Reish Lakish Ma'idich Seh, what's the meaning of the pasuk in the Latzim Ula Yolitz? Says Reish Lakish, the pasuk that says that if the Litzim who Yolitz, the cynics are cynical, Ula Anovim Yitin Chem, and to the Anovim, the humble, he's going to give favor. But Litame, someone wants to Aveiros, Hashem lets him. If someone wants to be pure, Hashem helps him. This is a mashal analogous to a person sells neist and a farsiman is something that smells good. Moving on to Lametes and Aleph. When the person comes to measure the neif, the foul-smelling item, do it on your own. Like Hashem says, you want to do an Aveira, do it on your own. But if someone comes to measure something that smells good, you tell him, I want to help you, I want to measure for you. Kadeshin is basim, so I myself could smell well. Anivata, both of us. So too, when someone wants to do good, Hashem says, I'm going to help you. Tanavei Rabbi Shmuel, 4 lines on the top, and Aleph, as we conclude the parak. Sin is mitamtem, it contaminates the heart of man. Shenemar, as the Apostle says, as the pasuk says, you should not contaminate yourselves through them because you might become contaminated. I'll think even that it means that it means that it's going to mess up your heart. Tana Rabbanan says the Brisa, what do we learn out from the pasuk? You do a little bit of an aveira, it gives you a lot of tama, a lot of impurity. If you do sins down here, you can be tame up there. Of course, ending on a positive note. You make yourself holy. Only a little bit you got to make yourself pure. Then Hashem says, I'm going to give you lots of purity, lots of holiness. We make yourself holy down here. We make yourself holy in this world, we'll be holy in the next world. We should do a chazara. We saw today a bit about chazara. We see what it means to take a little baby step, a little bit of kedusha. Hashem gives us a lot of kedusha. And Amir Hashem, as we begin almost a new year of Torah after Shavuos, we should be zeicha to learn many more prakim and mesechtais together.